Welcome back to another episode of Black Ice Reality Check. I'm your host, Black Ice. We have some special guests, but before I start, make sure you go to the description box below and click on HV Alpha, Black Ice Supplements. There's a new supplement out, helps you focus, helps you think quick on your feet. If you have ADHD, it'll help you get back on point. Here we go. I'd like to introduce the Iron Disciples. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
And why don't you start introducing yourself?
My name's John, part of the Iron Disciple crew. We started a Bible study probably about a year and a half ago. And then our brother here who decided, hey, let's start a podcast. So we have a little bit of outreach right now, and it's our first time in Vegas, and we're enjoying ourselves.
Came to Sin City.
Yeah. It's funny.
I was here a decade ago, but I guess I'm Mike Mulvaney. I was kind of the brains behind the podcast.
Yes.
And what kind of, like he said, we met at the gym, started a men's group, and then we were like, how can we extend this a bit? And what gave me the idea was like this red pill space. I had just discovered it and kept hearing like a lot of stuff that melded well with the Bible, kind of like you've talked with Glenn about. Like there's a lot of overlap here that makes a lot of sense. And we didn't really see a lot of people doing it from a Christian perspective well, like if at all. And we thought the church was like completely the bluest pill thing ever today.
Yeah,
so
Mike red-pilled us. Joe and I had no idea what
the church gets twisted in certain economic or certain segments of the country. The very liberal socialist type big cities, tech space, they'll put a twist on it, you know. I always make a joke. It's like and correct me if I'm wrong, the original Testaments, the Catholics took what they wanted, right? Or the Mormons added a book to the Jack Mormon Bible.
Canon,
and so when you get to these cities, they start adjusting the words of the Bible to fit their narrative so that everybody's welcome instead of going by the book, right?
You either take it all or nothing.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, but I'll let him continue.
I'm Joe Creation. John and I are twins. And we Iron Disciples. We started off with my brother and I just having coffee on Saturdays. We would have our own church. We were turned off by churches. We grew up in church. We used to play in the worship band. My brother would play guitar. I would play drums. And it became, I just wasn't interested in it any longer. You know, like the praise and worship turned me off. The music was just, I would skip that. We would skip that every time. Then from playing on the worship team to that, eventually it would. And then the sermons were just not interesting anymore. They're like TED Talks, and there wasn't a whole lot of deep diving. And then we found so many resources online where like we were getting your Daniel Lane Craig's and like just like you could, William Lane.
Sorry,
excuse
me.
Thank you.
James Bond.
It's my bad. So that's where we gravitated towards. We gravitated towards the YouTube and these other resources, and then we would come together on like Saturday mornings, and we would have bro time. And we'd pretty much talk. We'd open up the Bible. We'd research, and we'd do that. And then it just kind of grew from there, from gym bros, from guys we meet at the gym. We'd be like, hey, like, do you love Jesus? Or we'd talk about Jordan Peterson, or someone would be eavesdropping, or and the culture there's a lot of guys in the gym because I think it has to do with like the discipline. If you're going to make gains in the gym, you're used to certain tools that get you those gains. Just like willpower, discipline, restraint, diet. You're used to living a certain lifestyle. And I think we believe those same tools correlate very much with like building a strong spiritual man as well.
So you guys are out of Florida, right? Sarasota?
Yes, correct.
How far is that from Fort Lauderdale?
Depends. It's probably like 3 hours.
Okay, I'll be out there on the 17th of August.
Yeah. Say hi, man. Go hit the gym.
Cool.
Yeah,
PBD.
Bring some of those nootropics out.
There you go, man. There you go.
Plug it.
So, no, it's interesting. You said there's a lot of crossover correlation with the red pill. I know that and I say this, the red pill space is interesting because I don't think everybody agrees with everybody 100%. I think we're all 90% on the same page, but there's certain things that Rolo might say that I don't agree with, or Michael, or Adam Sosnick, which is good, right?
Yeah.
But we're pretty much all in the same arena. But it's like, no, I look at it this way, I look at it that way. But can you talk more about? You said it. Glenn opened your eyes to the red pill space. What do you mean by that? Can you elaborate on that?
Mike definitely did. As being a Christian, sort of in the traditional Western church, you get a very slated. It's very furtive. So the hidden truth of the Bible, like you said, the culture will kind of absorb it and then give their offering, depending on what they're most comfortable with. And that offering was very blue pill. So I had no idea. I was kind of oblivious to this. I'd been in relationships. We were raised by a single mom for a while, and the idea of feminine
and masculine traits as they're supposed to be represented in the Bible, and the preoccupation with these traits in a relationship is something that is very glossed over in the church. Rolo likes to say the Disney, sort of representation is what we got. It's the exact same thing what we got. So it was you had like that panic when you first start to realize there's a different domain that has sort of been hidden from you. And luckily we had the book. So we got the book from Mike. We started reading through Rolo's material. And it was because I like that Rolo gives the opportunity. He's really preoccupied with helping men learn. And you brought up the contentions within the space. And it's because you have a body of knowledge and you're developing your own prescriptions. He wants men to get to the point where they can make their own thesis, which is what you learn to do in college. It's what you learn to do with philosophies. It's a mindset that's not just an easy prescription, which is what they give you in church. Do this, and the nuance of your life is unimportant. And because the nuance is what defines your circumstances. You're with a different woman. She has a different background. You have a different background. All that's going to play into how you absorb that information. So I was lucky to have these two guys because we were able to have conversations on it.
Right.
And see where we were at and be honest with that and have to get rid of the baggage, which was honestly very difficult because we were brought up to defend and protect women. And initially, when you come into this, you feel like you're not doing that. Like you feel like the women are something you have to defend and protect. But what ends up happening is you understand you're actually defending and protecting them by treating them more honestly in the relationship. You're actually doing your due diligence as a man, and you're actually stifling their growth if you continue in the blue pill, right?
Well, and I think in the church, like that good example of the blue pill is the happy wife, happy life mentality. And I think that is what is pervasive within the church. And that kind of leads these men to become doormats, and that allows the women are the leadership in the relationship.
Well, I always say
and they're unhappy doing that.
Right.
Well, there's no such thing as happiness.
So in the vows,
you can't give anybody happiness.
Right. So in the vows, it doesn't say anything about being in love, right? If you look at the vows, right, and this is why I have these conversations. The common theme right now with modern day women that I have on my show is I fell out of love. And I said, well, you have duty and responsibility.
It's very sensationalist based.
And you have children. Now, I'm not saying, obviously if you're being abused physically, and even mentally, or verbally, if you will, but I'm talking about they feel like there's more in life. They get attracted to that. I call it the female attention necessity disorder. I created this coin phrase, this word, right? No psychologist is going to use it because they're going to say it's misogynist or chauvinistic. But they get attracted to the lights, right? The glimmer. And their girlfriend's on social media and she's getting all these likes and views and they want to do that, but they're in this relationship with their husband. And I see this trend when women
grass is greener.
Right, when they reach 40. My theory is, obviously, I believe we're put here to reproduce, mate, have offspring, children, family, right? And then once modern day women hit 40, and let's say they hit their, they're no longer having menstruation, right? They're not having their periods anymore. Their
ship has sailed.
The ship sailed. They have their children. They have the house. They have their finances. They have the car. And then what I see happening is they look at the guy and go, well, the Dockers, the plaid shirt, the dad bod, right? And the alligator, or what do they call those slip-on Crocs, right? With all the little things on it, whatever. And they go, I don't need him. And they take their stock and cash out. And then he's got to go get a little apartment, and they take the kids, the house, and spousal and child support.
Those are like the rich guys.
Well, but you see what I'm saying? Yeah, because it's I think internally, without a foundation, right, being unevenly yoked.
Yeah,
I feel like women have this. They don't feel like there's a void they need to fill.
Well, women they need to be led. Yeah, and the only way that's going to happen is if a man is in submission to Christ, and that's why we say like marriage is founded on the foundation of Christ. Both people believing in God and taking that as the very first, most important, highest priority in their lives. So once a woman gets to that age, she's not inclined to go look at the world and what everyone else is doing in Desperate Housewives and all this TV and all this secular, mimetic desire that's going and influencing them, because women are very perceptible to that. Like they're influenceable easily. Like that's a big part of the battle.
within being a man, and that's what it means to lead them. There should be a game plan that they're excited about when they hit 40, instead of being like, I want to go be a desperate housewife. Or
Right.
I'm going to go
Really,
do this
yeah,
because
it's
they're
a
idols.
regression.
They're idols.
'Cause
They're
really it
idols.
is a regression.
We're talking about Kim Kardashian.
Oh.
You know, look at all the female.
Don't get me started, man. I just
These are what the female. This is what they're putting up on the pedestal and what they want to be. These aren't married women with legacies that are true, that are
bar
showcasing
is
true
low.
femininity.
Right, I had a gal on the show. She's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, she's a great example." I'm like, "How is she a great example? She's successful financially, but I mean, we know all the men she's been with, right? I mean, at some point, you have to go stop."
This is not success.
No.
This
Being a
is
good
not
mother mean
success.
that you have a sex tape online for your kids to check out and their friends
Yeah.
to make fun of them over? I
Right,
don't think so.
And that was leaked deliberately.
Yeah.
But
Of course, by her mom.
Leaked.
I got a question. So you're married.
Yes, I am.
You guys single?
Yes.
So I have this question, and I've always asked this or wondered it. In Genesis, Adam and Eve, they were married, correct?
Yeah,
But not
God was the officiator.
Okay, great. So modern day society, I'm coaching men. I tell them, this is me. Don't get married till you're 35 or 40. That's what I'm telling them because they get to their highest success level and at that age range. But I also talk about, let's say right now, you guys obviously probably go text by text, and we're all sinners, right? I say I'm a Christian, but I'm one of the biggest sinners out there. As a Christianity is not hypocritical, but as a person, I'm a hypocrite, right? See, I think people get too twisted,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Oh, Christians are hypocritical. No. The guy is. Christianity isn't.
No, right.
But as a Christian, I sin every day. I was speeding here. Okay,
That's what we all need
breaking God's
Jesus.
laws, man's law. But here's my question: premarital sex. Probably don't agree with it. But if I go get married to my girlfriend, I go down and have a ceremony, right? By a priest, right? A reverend,
Covenantal.
whatever, pastor, but I don't sign the contract with the state. Am I still married in God's eyes?
Well, you don't even need the priest at that point. So what you need to ask yourself is a question again. If God is going to be in the room, so it's going to be a covenantal marriage, you need to ask yourself and your wife together, what kind of a representation of man and woman together do you guys? What's your concept of that? Is that coming from the Bible first of all? Do you have the ability to lead her spiritually? Do you know what that means deeply inside of you? This is why it's hard for an 18-year-old to get married covenantally, because he needs to be able to have a mentor, a pastor over him that he's talking to this about in order to vet whether he's properly prepared for what he's... So we're not just making an instinctual hormonal decision. So covenantal marriage does exist. However, it's tricky business because if they are not in submission to Christ, truly having devotion every morning, because there's so many of these Christians out there that we call sort of lukewarm. All right. Now, the issue with a lukewarm Christian is they know God's in the... They admit God, but they're not obsessed with God's the proposition of God. So they have limited their interaction with God, which is going to limit their success in any relationship thereafter. So that's why you have so many divorces in church, because people have this half-baked idea of relationship because they're not reading their Bibles.
So it's not premarital sex. If you're living with your girlfriend and you go through that process, and okay, we're married without the contract, because I believe modern day marriage should be revamped because of the economic factors that come into play, right? Women are rewarded for divorce. They use that as a tool. And I'm not talking about there's exceptions. I'm talking about the rule. And so what's happening with more and more men, by 2030, 50% of women will be single in America and childless. So what's happening, guys are like, I'm not going to get married. Right, because it now becomes a financial or a resource issue, right? Like if I'm my $5 million and I'm saying, why would I have zero net gain? We'll go through the ceremony. This is a non-common law state, Nevada. Mm-hmm. But if I get married, what can a girlfriend give me that a wife can't? By United States law's wife. What can a
is that coming from a Christian perspective?
Well, that's
or from
what I'm
a
saying.
secular
Why
perspective?
is
it's
it
really important? Because you're judging the quality of relationship. The qualifiers of marriage for us are sacred.
Right.
It's a sacred unit that transcends the physical. It's a metaphysical combination of flesh. We says we become one flesh. So you have a surrogate conscience in your wife. It's not something you can walk away from.
Right.
Right. You're not asking so much of the cop-outs we see with a lot of the younger guys, Mike brought this up yesterday, is they're so afraid of the wife taking everything from them, say like a marriage contract. And I can understand that.
They should be afraid of breaking their bond in front of God.
That's what they should be afraid of.
That's where their attention's not at.
But there's also the reality aspect. 51% of marriages end in divorce.
That's because they're not. They go to church. They have this very, very limited interaction with Christ that happens on Sunday, but God is not in the room all the time. They're not being submissive. They're not self-humiliating to the point. Self-humiliating, the carnal thing, right? So we're always in fight with this.
I would say, I would split this up. Like, there's two conversations here. There's like the secular, like the average, so 51% or whatever it is, and that's including everyone. That's including like the degenerate drug dealers that are getting married and
yeah, but it's a stat. It's a data, right? You have to look at.
But I think if you look at like from our perspective, we're like the women that we're going to consider are like not what like these fresh fit, like not the average girl that we're seeing on that we're seeing
the fresh and fit girls
that we're seeing online, that we're seeing elsewhere. Like I think there's. And then if you look at like marriage stats, it's kind of hard to parse, but like in Christian churches, in families that both of them share their faith, they're both like regular church attendees. Like there's different levels. Like they fit that dynamic of husband provider, woman is like home with the kids, stuff like that. Not like flipped on that because there's a lot of women now making more than the men, and then that screws up the marriage. So I think there's a lot of mitigating things where if the realistic divorce rate of like someone in your position or mine,
right.
like who we'd actually marry is probably like maybe 5, 10, 20% the most. Like the church I grew up in, like I was talking with my dad about this, like we couldn't even we thought maybe there was a 5% divorce rate.
But that's a different time.
Have you ever heard of the no true Scotsman philosophy? It's like a debate, right? Like there's no true Scotsman. You can never going to find a true Christian, right? There's a barometer, right? So in the West, we have a largely dead church, right? It's a huge church, but it's dead. These people aren't living a day-to-day devotion. So in his church, you had a lot of people who were it was a very living church. These people's divorce rates were on a different, it was 5% maybe. It was like it's non-existent.
Sure.
So that's the kind of issue that we run into as believers, because we have to say, look, you guys are having a lot of people who claim Christianity, but they're not actually operating their marriages with the Christian paradigm.
And
they're
that's
not really
why I say
doing that. They're more secular than they are Christian.
But do you think that had to do? I mean, there's a lot of factors. When feminism came into play, Lyndon B. Johnson with liberalism came into play, and feminism when it started, it was about choice, right? Not equality. Mm-hmm. And then you got all these different movements coming out. But back to what he was saying, not disregarding what you were talking about, but 1965, everything shifted.
Right.
Hormonal birth controls came out, right? Mm-hmm. They gave the women the right to be promiscuous without the effects.
Contraceptives,
right?
Man,
contraceptives. Yeah. And even not using them, now, women are having abortions at a high
it's
rate.
even more careless. It's like,
I mean, there's a million.
Yeah.
But these are the women I would say, like, we're not going to marry these women.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go here.
And the church shouldn't be bending to this crazy secular shit that's been going on forever. So, I mean, like, the world's always been in chaos. The church is where we're founded on truth, right? That's what we focus on. When guys and girls, Christians, they're getting married, they shouldn't be worried about what the government's doing. They should be worried about what God's going to judge them for.
This is why I talk about the guys who are fearful to enter marriage, right? Because their representation that's in the stats, right? This is how they're evaluating a woman, is the worst representation of a woman. And so when they get a good woman and they have all this fear, that's secular women, the most common outcome possible, they're not being fair with what they're actually engaging as far as relationships.
But you can't, so to your point.
Like a true Christian boy.
Right, but you have, let's say you're with a true Christian woman and all of a sudden she gets diverted and she wants a divorce. You have no control over that outcome.
You wouldn't have control. That's a given, right? It's a risk. You're not going to.
That's the risk I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And nowadays it's not fair to the men, I believe, in the situation
But if you eliminate the risk, you eliminate the sacredness of the bond.
Okay,
I will say that.
Okay,
there's no trust. To a certain extent, you don't trust the woman at all. You're starting from it's almost like you've made...
I don't trust society. I don't trust the outside interferences, the static on the TVs. When TV was regular before cable, I don't know how old you guys are. We had 4 channels that were black and white, and we were like pounding the TV to get the reception, right? But I want to shift gears here for a second. And you don't have to answer any of these questions you'll feel comfortable with. And I'm not trying to...
Dude, give us the hard ones.
Okay.
We're going to try.
So girlfriends, wives that you're dating, would you marry a woman that wasn't a virgin?
Absolutely, I'm not looking for a virgin personally. No.
But you have a pretty strict standard on how
Okay,
the body count level.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm not going for a high body count.
No,
at all.
so
my number probably would be like 5.
okay, good.
3 to 5 max.
Yeah.
Because that whole pair bonding is 6 and under,
Right?
And then if it's over 6, they have less than a 25% chance of bonding with the man. And how
Exactly.
realistic is that for Western society? I mean, there is virgins out there.
Most girls have 5 partners by the time they're 18.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a
That's
guess. but
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know how I
don't
was when
know
I was
if
young, but that's
a
me.
fact, but
I'm saying that's optimal. Like 10 and under, I would be like, okay, that's more realistic. But the idea is like women are so promiscuous nowadays with all the poly relationships, and just look at the
but
promiscuity.
these
it's crazy.
girl, like that's the problem. We're always looking at the average. We're not looking
Correct.
at the average
Okay.
anyway.
I mean,
Correct.
how are you going to get an honest stat on that anyway? Like how many?
Well, you
virgins
would know
People
if
are
you-
so
girl.
dishonest with their body counts.
But if
that
she was a virgin, you know from
Yeah.
the day after you got married,
you're going to have her
you
be
lied to me.
examined, right?
You lied to me. There's no
Yeah.
right. Okay, another question, because I always feel. Okay, here I go. Sound like a woman.
Anecdotal, baby.
Anecdotal.
Let's go there.
Don't you believe that we were put here to reproduce?
That's
okay.
a biblical
Primary
commandment.
commandment, right?
Okay,
Go
so
be fruitful.
So prior to religion coming into play, right? Prior to the birth of Christ, right, or Jesus walking among us, we had men with multiple wives, multiple girlfriends.
It's a good conversation.
You talked about that, right? I know
really
in
rich
Islam
guys.
they say you can have multiple wives, right? I'm not condoning that, but I understand certain people have polygamous relationships.
Yes, they do.
But inherently, I biologically we were put here to produce, right? And so men have this. Only 10% of men are having active sex with women, believe it or not.
Pretty
right?
sad, isn't it?
So
Because
what?
women are pergamous and they want
Yeah.
the top 10. So,
Right. So how does that come into play? I know the Bible talks about not having.
like Glenn says, it's not a sin, and I don't think it
far as
explicitly. Polygamy is a sin. I don't think it is a sin. Quote a sin. But if you look at the Bible within something to extrapolate on, the guys that did have multiple wives, like Abraham, it created so much conflict within his 2 sons. Like you actually had a division of the family. It was.
What was that king that had like 600
Solomon.
Yeah, I was
had
going to get there.
600
I was going to
wives.
get there
Oh,
because then you have David, and then he also had multiple wives, and that caused him endless strife, right? And then you have Solomon as well, and that was the downfall of the kingdom was his women problem. So it's like
That's the downfall of every man's kingdom.
that's what I'm kind of getting
That's
at.
right.
It's like
That's right.
The proof is in the pudding.
Right.
Here are some guys that are way smarter. They have direct communion with God than we'll ever be. So why do you think that it's a good idea for you to go ahead and do that? Unless it's like some kind of circumstance where it's like you're on some island and there's 3 women there, and like you're going to prolificate with all 3.
Which is a
now you're
it's a
talking about the
race.
man's
This is
ideal
a
dream.
crazy hypothetical,
That's like a 9-year-old
right? You know what I
dream
mean?
right
There's
there,
Right,
right?
nine. I don't know about 9.
Well,
I don't wanted my.
Hopefully by 10 you realize it's never going to
But
happen.
the idea is like it's a lot of stress, and if you've ever have one woman, you know how much stress that is. Now multiply that by 2 or 3, and then you're dividing your attention amongst them. Like, look, it is a shit show. It's nice to think about. It's like a childish dream, but in reality, I think it's a lot harder to do unless you're like some sheik out, with billions of
Well, I
dollars
think
that doesn't really pay
that's-
attention to each one of the wives. There's not like a real soul connection with each
When
one
people
of them.
use the religious past as this excuse for wanting to pursue that lifestyle, they never do it the way that the religion describes it. Like Exodus is very clear, like if you're going to have multiple wives, you have to treat them equally. So like it's supposed to be like you buy her a house and her a house, and you have to treat them equally. It's none of this like I'm gonna have a main woman and these side chicks, which is how it gets translated to today.
That's a lot of work, man.
Yeah, it's
One
crazy.
wife's enough.
Yeah.
I
So
agree.
Literally. I mean,
Islam is the same in how they have to treat their wives, and it's like, who's gonna do that?
That's
I'd
a
like to
good
point something out though about the Bible. It's not an exhaustive list of rules. So some of the rules, what it's meant to do is encourage your conscience and your spiritual discernment to the point where you can sniff out sin that's not explicit. The dialectic of the Bible is meant to, it's a living word, right? So it's meant to impact your discernment. So the dialectic of the Bible is meant to show you that if you look at these stories and the way that they end up, like Cain and Abel, right? So you see the brother murdering the other brother. What was the real story there? Don't murder? No. The real story was offer your best to God, right? Because Abel offered his very best in his sacrifice to God. Cain did not.
That led to jealousy, which led to murder, right? But it's not explicit, right? It goes through that story, and then it goes on to other things. So it's up to us to use discernment, because the whole Bible is not going to say, don't cut people off in traffic. All these little minor sins that we engage with all the time, that if it was an exhaustive list, it would be never ending. Oh. And so we have to use discernment when it comes. That's why Joe brought up these stories, because in the examples where you see polygamy, these men encountered severe hardship. And so that's what we pay attention to. Because if it was
why do you think they're getting severe hardship because of it?
Because
is that a punishment?
Here's the thing. So again, what is explicit?
Think about what it says in Genesis.
Explicit in
women
Genesis,
will be contrary to you. Now you add that and multiply that by multiple women, and then you're one man. So like further,
that sounds like me being on a panel with 8 feminists, man.
Yeah, it's like you're outnumbered and outgunned, bro.
But let's look at what God did with Adam and Eve, right? He made man and woman one for each other. So that's a template.
Well, didn't he create Eve for Adam?
He did, but I'm talking about the number polygamy.
Okay,
just the polygamy discussion.
But didn't he have a wife before Eve? Wasn't there something about somebody was talking about that in the scripture, that there was
Adam?
After Eve, wasn't he with another woman?
No.
Okay.
Adam had one. Isaac had one. These are two.
Abraham's the first guy to have multiple.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. There's 60. How many books? 66 books in the Bible. How many?
Lamech was the first one. Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so how come they took out books like the Book of Enoch, got removed? Because like in the Ethiopian Bible, wasn't there like
Apocrypha.
300 books?
Okay, so I'll talk to you. That's a great question. There's something called Second Temple literature, which the Book of Enoch falls into that category. Second Temple literature is basically when the prophets were quiet. So when Israel had the prophets, last prophets of the minor prophets, which are the last books of the Bible, there was a silent period where Israel has been taken out of Israel, so they're in they've been split up. They're encountering the discipline from God from being too fat and too out of disconnection with their father, with their king, the Lord, so he disperses them into the nations. So they have no temple. And when they have no temple, they can't pray, they can't sacrifice, they can't do anything. They've been disconnected. Effectively, they've disconnected themselves from God. So during this period, the Book of Enoch, there's different things that are written, because they have posterity still at the center. They still have religious practice. The Jews are traditional badasses. They've kept it no matter wherever they go. If they have one claim to fame, it's their diligence and their accumulation of tradition and keeping it. So these books, because there's the Gospel of Thomas, there's Gnostic Gospels, there's a lot of these different books that you can still read. They're auxiliary, but they don't fall into line with the Gospel. The Book of Enoch is the same way. It's a very good text. Once you've mastered the canon, once you've integrated that into your being, you have a very good general sense of idea of what the canon is. You can start to look into some of these Second Temple literature. But there's a reason why they're expelled. There's a reason why they are not in the canon and why they're not considered the inspired Word of God. And it's a very fascinating. You want to build your faith and you want to really feel encouraged by this. Because people will say, oh, men chose the canon. That's true. God worked through Moses. God worked through every single time he uses a man as his instrument, right? Because he wants a relationship with men. So by looking into these tough questions, we always encourage, because we were primarily started as a Bible study, we would notice that the men would have faith, but they'd come across something weird in the Old Testament, something obscure, and it would cause them to just shy away. It's this sort of ignore, but pine into it, look into it. And my faith was honestly so built up by seeing the church fathers canonize, the amazing attention they gave to it, considering each document. I mean, it gives you such a high respect for men and the scribes and the respect for history that we have.
You brought up something interesting, and I'd like to just point this towards marriage, since we're talking about marriage. And Christ says, take care, or Paul says, the men take care of your wives as Christ in the church, right? And if you look back, the Jewish people were God's people, and they were in a marriage. They were in a bond. Like you could see that as the first marriage, right? Moses comes out, and he leads them across the Red Sea, and they start to idol worship, right? They see the Canaanites, and they're impressed with the Canaanites. The Canaanites do idol worship, they sacrifice, and they have all these tattoos, and they have all this different culture, right? And these are people that have seen the plagues in Egypt occur. They've seen the parting of the Red Sea. They've seen manna come down from heaven to feed them. They've seen like serious miracles occurring. Yet they're still like tempted
by these Canaanites, because obviously worshiping Moloch or Baal, these are demons, and they do have power, and these were a very strong force to be reckoned with people. So they're actually having converts go down this path, right? So if you think about the Jewish people like a woman, right, and then God as being the man, and then being married, you know, there's this mimetic desire. And the mimetic theory is this, and I'd like to just quit. Have you ever heard of Rene Girard?
Yeah.
He's a philosopher, he's Catholic, but he coined the mimetic theory. And mimetic theory, in a nutshell, is how we are influenced by the world. That's what it is. What the world does and why women are more inclined to mimetic theory than men are, right? So here are the Jewish people. They're looking at, and they stray off. They have infidelity in them, right? So God cuts them off,
the 40-year-old, right?
There's that cut off, right? God chastises them, right? They want a king next. They want to be like the rest of the world, right? The Jews, they want to, like the woman, like you're saying, the 40-year-old. Well, I don't need this man anymore. My kids are done. I'm going to move on, right? I want to do what everyone else is doing. I want the king, right? Well, you're not like everybody else. You're my wife, and that's what makes this special. We have a whole story together. We raised kids together. We built a world together. What are you doing? You know what I mean? This is our legacy we're taking care of. But they go ahead and they do that, right? And then there's the second they got a king, it was a shit show and decline right afterwards, all the way down to nothing. So if you look at the Bible that way, you can really extrapolate on, like, this is the mimetic desire that we have to control within leading a woman. You know, and this is what a man does when he tries to lead and says, this is where we're going as a tribe, for our legacy, for our kids. We're ongoing until death. Then we see God, and then we're eternal beings, right? We're not trying to make it up for this world. These women, they'll get caught up in the world.
It's a regression, though. That's the point, is we want to regress. And the lie from Satan is you're progressing, right? You deserve freedom. You raised kids, right? All these things you deserve to act out. And the idea of service to your community, being a real pioneer for your community in the form of service, is like, who wants to do that?
Right.
You know, no one wants to do that. But that's the true value of a human.
So these are good. This is good. I'm gonna keep shifting gears.
That's good.
And I'm asking you questions that I have. Maybe the viewers are thinking the same thing. I can't jump into their mind. Do you feel, because, okay, let's talk about Andrew Tate and Sneeko converting to Islam. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that a lot of Western men now are converting to Islam? Because I'm sure that's going to be a trend because of the obedient women and not because of the religion. Because I know it's a common theme, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because
well, would that be a conversion? Is the first question you need to ask yourself.
Right.
Because
So
if you're incentivizing conversion based on finding a wife,
that's my point.
Then it's not a conversion.
Because what I'm seeing is they feel, which isn't true, Christianity in Western society has failed them, but it hasn't. It's the mindset of the people, right?
And the culture.
And the culture. So I see Andrew Tate, and I can't speak for him, Sneeko, but I see them converting, and they've said several times on podcasts, they're done with the Western culture.
Sneeko
It's the
always
last
Muslim,
true
or did he
religion.
convert?
No, he hasn't. He just
So
he's
he-
following the Tate's lead, right?
Gotcha.
They see him as being soft, Christians as being soft, and I hear Tate say it's the last true religion. Basically, it's the only one that's like held.
And
to
I know
guns.
the Prophet Muhammad spoke about Jesus, didn't he? Talk
Well,
about Jesus.
Prophet Muhammad. I'm
He
not
was in
gonna
a
be
cave.
critical.
There's a dude in a cave.
He was. Let's be honest. He was in, and this is not a condescension or anything. This is just being honest. He was an illiterate goat herder. Okay, so like he may have had insights that were good, and he bases all of the Muslim. You could almost look at the Muslim brothers and sisters as, if you want to be real with all the different sects of Christianity and how far they're different, like the Protestants, Catholics, the Reformation period, all these different sects of Christianity, they are kind of like a different sect of Christianity from a Judaic point of view. They use the Abrahamic story. They use the stories of the Old Testament where God was a singular entity. So enter into the New Testament where God's person is further revealed to us. As we are now all high priests, have direct communion with God, we see God's personality is three.
Okay.
This is a huge departure, right? So this is where they don't run in line with us. There's tons of doctrinal issues and other underlying currents. I'm just pointing out like the big ones that they're going to tell you. But the point that I want to bring up as far as the attractiveness to it, because we have a sister who's a Muslim as well. She grew up in a Christian family. And I feel like for the younger people,
when they're going through their desire for a rite of passage, and this is what's not expressed to the young people enough, like you're going to have to self-identify. That period is going to bring you to the brink of insanity and back. It's usually going to be between 14 and 22. You're going to be very idealistic. You're going to have this desire to understand yourself. That's trial by fire. And you can only encounter that by putting yourself into the fire. You cannot do that by getting these false heroes like Achilles, Ajax, Odysseus, Hercules. These are false heroes. They're hyper masculine. That's
Biden.
like Tate.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
it's more like
Tate
it's more
or,
like Tate.
you know, more of these-
It's more like these guys
Right.
where a young guy can be like,
Well-
I want to be like that. But the point that I'm making is they're so emphatic. The Muslims are so emphatic. They see strength in that. Whereas they go to the Christians, and it's an unfortunate disease representation we have of Christianity in the West. Because if you were in China and you were interacting with the church there, you'd be like, this is insanely strong. These people are insanely convicted. They are incredible people, bonded together, community, every single box they're checking. But because their experience with the church is in the West is this just fickle, diseased, spineless church, they look at the Muslims' conviction and the emphatic nature by which they speak, and they see true belief.
There's
They
no
see true
there's no
passion.
price to admission.
So-
the Muslims have a price to
Where
admission.
you-
I was gonna say. So my take on this is, so these guys are kind of trying to find God because they're not getting fulfillment out of the life they're currently living, which is basically hedonism, and they're picking the cool, like they're viewing religions like a club. And
So
right,
Tate's that face.
I mean, that's
For the Muslim crew, for the red pill guys, yes.
I think
Yes.
I think they're viewing religion like a club. I would love to have a conversation with them. Like, do you think this is objectively a true religion? And you're saying like,
a
or
good
is it
point,
kind of
man.
like all roads lead to God, and you just pick this club
Well,
because they're holding out against culture?
So Andrew, we should all go to Romania and have a conversation with Andrew Tate. You heard that, right? We don't need to pay $50,000, Andrew. Just have us out there, whatever.
Yeah, I would love to chat.
That'd be
on that.
great.
But so I think with Islam and why it's holding out, like I would love to see Islam in America like as the majority, because I view Islam as holding out because they don't have a democratic society. They still have like aristocracy going on. They don't have the freedoms we have. They don't have the wealth we have. I think if they got democracy like we have and the wealth we have, feminism would sneak its way in there.
Well, yeah, that's the point. That's why they don't have it, except Dubai. Dubai is pretty open to a point,
Yeah.
right? But
They're
I mean,
mostly Sufi,
right? So that's true. They're not. What's the other?
the more radical form of Muslim.
Yeah, and like the Templar Knights and Islam have been battling. I mean, since day one, the Christians and the Muslims have been battling.
It goes back to Abraham having his two sons from two different wives,
Jacob and Esau.
Jacob and Esau.
Abraham, why'd you do that?
It's amazing though. I mean, because it's there, and you can see these sibling rivalries, and these things never stopped. They continue, and they're right here in front of us.
Okay, I got another question. This is good stuff, right? You know how you're watching the Discovery Channel and you're watching all this stuff that can mess people's minds up? I mean, Netflix is a perfect example of misrepresenting characters in history, right?
Oh,
To
God,
fit the narrative.
dude.
Cleopatra.
The woman
Cleopatra's
king.
parents. Cleopatra's parents were from Macedonia. Is it
Mesopotamia.
not Mesopotamia? They were
Macedonia?
Macedonian, and off the Greek island. Her father and mom, right? Which is that black? Because now they're playing Cleopatra as being black, which she wasn't. But then the black community comes after me and says, "No, she was." I said, "I did. I studied it, right?" And so I want to go to this thing on the Discovery, because this is how we educate ourselves these days. We turn the TV on and like, Cleopatra's black.
Stupid.
Okay,
bro.
or we watch Discovery Channel, right? And now you have this whole
It's entertainment. It's not study.
this whole theory, and I'm not saying I disagree with it. I actually kind of believe it. Every different book of religion talks about a ball of fire coming from the sky. You know where I'm going with this? And what was that chariot of fire? And then the second part, two-part question to this, and I asked Glenn this, I want to see what your answer is who is God? Is Jesus God, or did he talks about his Father as
Talking
God?
about the Godhead. Yeah.
Right? And then was Jesus created in the image of man by God? Because there's this whole theory that,
We'll follow that back. Who was man made in the image of?
say again?
So if you follow it, because you ask kind of it's a weird, these questions, if we look back at the lineage of the question, so God made Adam in the image of God, and then Jesus, we call him the Son of Man. Why do we do that? We also call him Son of David. We also call him the Son of God, because Adam was the first son of God.
So then was Jesus God?
Is the second son of God. Yes, he's God incarnate.
Okay. So the question is, do aliens exist?
Demons exist.
Literally, we were listening to a clip on that from today.
Because Congress today just
Yeah, I just saw
announced that 3 Air Force.
I don't know. I think Elon Musk strongly believes that they don't, which I find is interesting.
I disagree, and I'll tell you why.
I want to believe they exist.
Well, okay, so listen.
What is an
right there.
alien?
Well, that's the point. It's
Angels
a foreign substance, person, or biological being that we're not used to seeing. In other words, like if an asteroid landed and there's a metal that they're going to China's trying to go after, and it's like the metal could be worth $1 quadrillion. It's a foreign substance. It's alien to us. Alien meaning we're not aware of it. So if God created the earth, right, in Genesis, right, everything around us, did he create the universe? And who's to say that our physics exist here, don't exist somewhere else?
Yeah, I'd say it's a simple. For us, we have to operate by faith. So obviously, God's he's transcendent in his person, which is going to be your answer for the Godhead, right? He's the most specific person. He's beyond space, time, and matter, right? So he's beyond the personhood that we think. And even us, we have the metaphysical and the physical representation of our being. The metaphysical being more vital, right? So we're eternal. The metaphysical spirit part of you is eternal. The physical isn't. So God is a person that requires 3 figures for us to have an image of. The image of God. We're made in his image. Does that mean he's a humanoid? Or does it mean that it's the desires, what we are as a co-creator with God as we progenerate the species? Is it that? So you have to have a deeper understanding of image instead of more of an aesthetic, right? The aesthetic is what confuses people. So aliens, we know they're angels. We know they're fallen angels. They're demons, right? These are things the Bible we know exists. We know these things exist. Is it possible God went and had his another entire world with creatures that were sentient and had spirits? I wouldn't put it past him.
I don't think it's something a problem.
We know. I wouldn't. And
does that conflict with salvation?
That's a good question to ask, right?
I don't think it does. Is it interesting to think about?
Is it
Absolutely.
heretical?
It's a fun rabbit hole, but I don't think it has anything to do with whether or not you're going to get saved or not. I don't think that.
Or
that
the
matters.
truth.
So
of the
even
Bible,
if they were
or the truth of the Bible.
Right.
I mean, if you look in the book of Enoch, they have the Watchers, they have the Nephilim. There's a few different ideas.
Well, and the Sumerians talk about it. All the stuff, the Sumerians, all the technology supposedly that existed. The Sumerians.
Look
right?
at Tubal and Tubal-Cain, and before. Well, this is in Noah's time. The world. There was a lot of technology that was going on there, and I mean, they got special information from Tubal-Cain was fashioning. He was like the father of technology. And it got so enormous, and the technology and the evil ended up imploding on itself, right? So there were epochs before Noah where there was high technology. We know that. So it's Atlantis or whatever. We don't know what the hell happened back then, but there was a fall. There was a fall. God said this world is too evil right now, and they had to get to a point to where the whole world needed to be cleansed. So we don't know what business they were up to, man. We have no idea, but we just know that technology was involved, and we don't know where it came from, what they were dealing with.
And it's like, if you're a Christian,
crazy.
I guess the question here is it heretical to believe in aliens? So say, for instance, we're presented with irrefutable evidence that aliens are here, or they've been here, or they exist, whatever we got, and we have to accept the fact that there's these beings, sentient, intelligent, and then we have to therefore assume there's a spirit involved, so there's connectivity with God. I don't believe you're walking into being a heretic by accepting that information. However, I would postulate that the demons are a far more believable thing, and it's because of this reason. So Satan masquerades as the angels will manifest themselves in many different ways. So in Daniel, the angels are very interesting looking. They have these mechanisms next to them, almost like tools. And then in many times they're just men, right? So we know they can transmutate into different figures, right? Sometimes they're riding horses. They can do and accomplish a lot of different things. We know that Satan also can do that, right? He was a snake, right? So there's a lot of debate on whether or not he was a snake, or again, the imagery there. What's the symbolism? What's it trying to communicate? But we know that Satan and his demons have one preoccupation. Primary preoccupation is to take the attention of humans off of Christ, off of God, which goes back to the Jews, right? As soon as they started looking at the Canaanites, their attention was off of God. They started imitating the Canaanites, and Satan's accomplished his goal. So if there are aliens, right, and I have physical representation, I'm not going to... The risk we run is worship, idolatry through attention.
I was going to say that. Exactly.
So what Christians run into all the time is idolatry through attention, right? So many Christians claim faith, but they actually worship money. And you can do a quick arithmetic by how much of their day is spent pursuing God, praying, reading, praying not on their face all the time, but just being a servant to Christ, and how much time they spend pursuing, say, self-interest, money. What are they doing? What are their excuses for that? So if I see an alien and I'm preoccupied with knowing their story, I have to put God first during that. So that's going to be the risk they run. They're going to be intensely interesting. If we're given evidence, right? It's going to be the most rapturing thing that humanity's ever found, right? If there's actual evidence. Think about what it's going to do to society. So I'd be more inclined to believe Satan would be using that to take people's attention off of the gospel, because then when there's aliens and they're intelligent, they're going to immediately think they have the answer. There's going to be the desire to make them Messiah, right? That is what people like to do.
So what? Okay, so now I want to shift gears, because that was some good stuff. Because we got about 15 minutes. So I want to get into modern dating and the culture of and the indifferences between men and women, where my focus is, if you will. Mm-hmm. And you guys have answered a lot of those questions. But do you think the major problem right now in society between men and women is you're saying it's the lack of faith in Christianity?
I'll let these guys take it. These guys.
Well, where do we even start
how do you
with that?
guys navigate? Like, I don't want to say
rough.
you guys got a mobile gospel, but you got a podcast. It sounds like you're part of like a Foursquare, non-denominational type Christianity.
Yeah.
Which is, I would say, and I use this word lightly, progressive Christianity that stays within the book, right? Not outside the book, like we see in Seattle, alphabet kids, LGBTQ, R, X, Y to the third power, and then there's a preacher that's a lady that's a lesbian.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Yeah. And then, so talk about, I mean, single guys, like, wow.
It's rough. It is
and how
rough.
old are you?
I'm 30.
34.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're getting to a point where you're like, and I don't want to say you're running ads on a dating app, but like, what do you do? I mean, because I'll talk guys that aren't Christians are having a hard time.
Yeah,
They're getting women that are just like,
we like Rolos' book is a perfect example. We see so many women run Rolos' timeline, which is basically 18 to 28 are the party years. At 29, they're showing back up to church, want to talk to guys like us. And then after they ran through like a dozen guys, and so that I'd say that's
a dozen's a light number.
Yeah, yeah. I don't.
Let's be real.
Yeah. So that I would say that is probably one of the more frustrating, like, things to wrap, like, even just stomach it. Like, I don't even know the correct answer to it either, because I understand, like, there's plenty of guys that kind of do the same thing too, because I've talked with girls who have like maintained their virginity, and their complaint to me was, guys now just view me as like, I'm going to go run through a bunch of girls in my 20s and wife the virgin. And so there's both sides of this going on. So it's...
Well, and again, back to my point, wait till you're 35 to 40. That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think men have the resources. I mean, over 10,000 people were interviewed by Dr. David Buss. I don't know if you read his book, Evolution of Desire. He's a clinical psychologist out of Austin, Texas, right? University. And he talks about all these cultures, backgrounds, religions. Overwhelmingly, women look for resources to make sure that their children and their
it's not
survival.
a bad thing in and of itself.
And so what happens as a young man, we come out the gate, we have no value, and we try to resources, not to focus on money like you said, but it's like once you have that house built on concrete, not bamboo, your faith is strong in your case, or whatever the case may be, now you have the resources to say, okay, I can take on a wife, I can have children, she can be a homemaker as an option.
I would 100% agree with that strategy too. We tell some of the guys in our group too, like they're 22 and they're like, wanting to go after the girls. I'm like, dude, just focus on building yourself now. Like, don't put so much effort into that, because it's going to It's going to.
It's a lot of work, and they just want to have sex.
So I'm gonna give. I've never said this on a podcast. Here's the cheat code. You ready? Don't date in an A market city. Big cities.
Tampa, San Fran.
This is a B market. A market: Seattle, San Francisco, LA, New York, Atlanta, Chicago. No go. Too many outside influences. B market is a no go. It's got to be a C market.
Yeah.
And let me give you an example.
Kansas.
With or without Christ, because you're going to lead, right? You're gonna influence that person in a positive light. It's not control. It's not manipulation.
Right.
But if you go now, I always talk about this, and people are probably tired of hearing this. My girlfriend's from Tucson. I call it Tucson. It's an hour north of the border. They're so sheltered from the outside influences of society, outside of Instagram and Facebook, that they see that in TikTok. But they live in a small town.
That's where I grew up, small town Midwest America.
Okay.
So I've seen that.
That's where you find Mrs. Right.
Yep.
Because she has not been indoctrinated into a false narrative, ideology, life itself, and influenced by association, because you're the best of the 5 people around you. You guys are successful because of the 3 of you stick close together. Anybody that comes into your inner circle, you don't want to be tainted, right? If I come in and start talking about, we should talk about Lucifer and worship him once a day, you're like, dude, get out. We don't want to be inflicted with that. So the point is when you go to the 25, 26-year-old, however old, right? And then it's like, yeah, maybe 3 guys, 6 guys, okay. And she believes in God, but she's not actively involved in the church. Her mom raised her to be a good wife. Her dad said, take care of your husband. That's the winner.
You can definitely.
So the guys that they're on dating, I said, don't be on a dating app.
Yeah, in like New York City, like what are you going to find there?
Okay, now I hope everybody's listening. Here's the cheat code. Instagram, hashtag the towns, the small towns like I did, and it was like Tucson. And
You did that?
This is it. This is the gem. I was because I was on these dating apps, right? And I'd see a woman with a face. Next picture would be a face. Next picture would be a face. And I'm like, okay, what's this look like? And then I'd read I have 10 cats and box wine, and you can't work out. I don't like the gym. And, and I'm all about the spirit world and the zodiac signs. And I'm like, brutal. And then
Red flags.
And then it was like, do I take a photo with my shirt off, show my abs? At the time I had abs. Or do I, just talk about, and you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So I hashtag the small town. And then women, I start going through, and I was like, Tucson. I saw little restaurants in Tucson. I saw all the Latinas were hot to a point. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then it was like, oh, I found, fitness food. This girl was meal prepping. And I saw her Instagram, about 3 weeks old. I saw one guy, is like, wow. Oh, I think that's her brother, right? I'm doing my diagnostic check, right? and she works out, but she's not doing the TikTok and the booty out and
doing it for herself,
spanking her ass. And I'm like, so I just liked her food pic, and then she liked mine, and then we start following each other. So this went on for a while. 45 days later, after we've already talked, we built this relationship. Then I flew her up, didn't have sex with her, right? Because this is the thing.
I agree. It's good.
Friendship first, relationship second. Here's what happens inherently with men. If I tell the guys this, if you have sex with a woman right away, all of a sudden you're not interested. You didn't have any bond. Now, if you date for purpose, there's guys that don't date for purpose. They just want to have fun. That's their deal. But if I'm older, I was at a point like I'm done. I'm done with, the pole and the thing and the, whatever, the girls and the.
There's intention behind what you're doing.
So I knew myself because I'd been with women and I really liked them. I said, why am I not interested? Because there was no bond. Women generally won't sleep with a guy unless there's an emotional connection. Guys are actually the same to a point. Oh, yeah. So the second time she came up, yeah, okay, right? But she ended up leaving her career, flying to Seattle, and then we actually moved down here. Wow. But she's from Tucson. She didn't know what 6 figures meant. She'd been on a plane one time and she's 26 years old. Nobody leaves Tucson. You don't move there. You move away from it, right?
Yep.
And so Tulsa, wherever you said that, the small town.
Yeah, I'm from small town Minnesota.
Okay, so you think about the girls in the small towns, and here's a funny thing. I say date a 6, cute, 5's average. and a 6. And as she progressed in life with me, she went to a 7 and an 8.
Look at Kylie
Things
Jenner,
changed,
bro.
right? But not too far gone, like, cheeks and all that. She got her teeth, veneers, she competes, athletic. But the point is, if I would have started in one of the big cities, there's a term called alpha widowed. Have you heard this?
Yep.
She's been with a guy like me that was making $500,000 a year, and she's done it all. If I dated a girl that was with Andrew Tate, I can't compete with that. Mm-hmm. I can't give her that lifestyle. I'm a humble peasant, right? With my sheep, right? And so what happens is this woman's eyes get open to a whole new world. We're going to Las Vegas? I've never been on a plane. But you're guiding her. You're leading her.
It's good.
You're in her. She's in your care. Yeah. So that's why I always tell guys, man, if you're dating for purpose, if you're just dating to have fun and party.
I mean, you did have resources because, like, she's obviously, you have the location and everything.
Yeah, but $46,000 is the average income for men in America, right? $100,000 a year, $112,000 a year, the top 13% income. But $100K in an A market, you can't survive.
Yeah.
I don't know how Sarasota is. I don't know if it's a B or C market. Probably a B.
Probably C.
Yeah.
C? Okay. Yeah. So $100,000 there, you're doing really well.
Yeah.
Right? So, and obviously what you're doing isn't for money, but you'll be blessed. That's a byproduct of you, and you're not doing it for that. But as time goes on and people start donating and helping your cause and uplifting you, hey, man, I want to do this for you here. I got your tickets for a year. I want to donate to your cause. You become blessed, but then Sarasota is a perfect example. You're already in a C market, right? You see what I mean?
Just a lot of old people.
The problem with I would say Sarasota.
Well, they got that in Tucson. A lot of old people, right?
The problem is like where we're from, it's still like even though it's a smaller town, Florida, it has the same Florida problems as like Miami. And so you got all these girls that have sugar daddy options because
they all do, but it's the nuclear family, how they were raised.
Yeah.
Exactly. She was raised in Mexico, came here when she was 8, right? Mom and dad at home, double wide trailer, poor place, poor area in Tucson. Went to school, got good grades.
Mm-hmm,
didn't speak any English when she came here. Different culture.
And that's beautiful. That's what you want.
And I figured it out.
You can
it's kind of
learn.
You're kind of a passport, bro, in some sense.
I am, but I met her. She's here, right?
Yeah, right.
So one quick statement before we end.
I just want to say that was great.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
yeah, really good.
That's some great advice.
Yeah,
That's
really good,
awesome.
Really good.
I mean, and they're. I want to say. I don't want to say they're pure, but they're somewhat innocent and naive to a point. Now, if the wrong guy gets a hold of them, that can be bad.
Yeah.
But I know you guys will get good.
She's
intention.
a daughter of Christ, so you know.
Yeah,
so.
and so I went down there and saw her friends. I was like, "Those are your friends? Wait a minute." Whoa.
Maybe you can hook these guys up.
Right. But you see what I'm saying? And the guys that they were with, they were like the alpha. They indirectly, like they paid the bills. Like the guy was smoking weed, playing Xbox, drinking beer.
Chummy. Yeah.
Because that's all they have is options down there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with you. One positive message you can say to the viewers, subscribers, either men or women or both, before we go. And I'm going to go from you to your brother down the row.
Well, crack open your Bible. You can find one. It's free. It's anywhere you will go and look for one. And start doing deep dive study, source things out. Get an appetite for a bit of suffering and for the non-glamorous and for self-persecution, kind of like the gym. You got to work hard to make gains. No pain, no gain. And don't be so concerned with what the world's doing. Be concerned with being an eternal being and what treasures you're putting in heaven. And to God, humans are the most important, most valuable thing in the world. So us as Christians, that's what we should be concerned with.
Amen.
Amen.
I would say for men especially, find a good brotherhood. I think that is probably the one thing we see men just lack today, especially Christian men that don't like the church. They're just sitting there doing things alone. They're trying the lone wolf strategy. It's not working. And I think as we have found, and we are fortunate that God connected us, like the Christian brotherhood we have, and that I think men are missing today is so vital. So put effort into finding that.
Man, good. I would say in connection with that, when you're looking for men, like Joe had said, the people are of the most important. These are people that are eternal, that are going to be either your sisters and brothers in Christ, your eternal family, or not. So when you're connecting with people,
don't always think about how much you like them. Really think about how much you can serve them, how you can love them, because there's a lot of people you'll like, and they're kind of acquisitional. Like, you have a friend because you like them. You have so much in common. That's easy. Jesus says it's easy to do good things for the people you like, your family. The evil people even do that. But if you want to be a son of God, you love your enemy. And so to take that back a couple steps, if you find somebody who's disconnected and lonely and they've been social media'd out, they have no idea of friendship, and God keeps putting them in your life, you keep running into them, that's a good indication you found somebody God wants you to pour into. So they may not be the coolest person in the world. They may not be the most attractive, the most interesting. But if God's put them in your life, pay attention to that. Keep running into that person. Pay attention to how God's pushing them on your heart and putting them in there. So be sensitive to how God's communicating to you.
Great messages, guys. Hey, I want to encourage everybody before we go, make sure you follow them on their Instagram. You guys have a YouTube channel now too?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to tag the YouTube on the video. Make sure you like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and remember, the #1 podcast in Vegas where the truth will set you free. Stay strong, and we'll see you soon.
Amen.
Awesome.